Hi everyone, it's me, Spring, the fiber enthusiast, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about color work or stranded knitting or fair isle. Depending on how you say it, it's all based on the same thing. We're going to be working with 2 or more strands of yarn and colors. And let's talk about how you can accomplish this. If you've never done it before, there are some easy tips that you can follow and little tricks along the way, and it will help you to get the best results absolutely possible. The other way is practice. Practice, 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 and that will give you an overall feel of it. Now, we're going to be doing this in the round. When you're talking about color work and doing swatches of color work, it's best to do a sample in the round because you're not going to get the same when you do it in the flat. So that is just a couple of quick little tips, and we will dive into more as we go along. So what I have in front of you is just simply a 2-color strand of knitting. So I have a main color and I have a contrasting color. So you're going to, first of all, want to choose your contrasting color accordingly. If you're using this color Fluffy Cloud as a main color, you do not want it to appear at any point in time in your contrasting color if you're using a variegated. If you're using 2 solid colors, you're going to want to make sure that they are different enough that your pattern shows up. Now, while using these contrasting and main colors, you also want to take into consideration the fluffier the yarn, so say mohair or something with a large halo, it's going to distort your image that you're trying to get on your colorwork pattern. So that's also something to consider when you're considering your yarn choices. For me, here on our samples, we're working with Soho Vista, and now that's from Hirschner's, and the colorway is Fluffy Cloud. That is my main color. The contrasting color is the Ice Picasso, and that is this one here. Super shiny, super pretty. My goodness, I love this yarn. So I decided to go with it as a contrasting color. The next tip I have for you is to mind your tension. And I will give you examples of that as we go further into depth over the course of this video. So what I mean by minding your tension is with colorwork stranded knitting, you have these floats that you create on the back side of your work. If you don't mind your tension, it'll be too tight and you won't have any stretch in your outcome of your project. So you want to be able to stretch this out and it sit properly like it should if you wasn't doing this color work. So minding your tension and understanding how to work these floats on the back side of the work is really important. And being able to not have it pucker up because it's too tight and you end up with these spots like this along the way and it not stretch because your strands on the inside, your floats, are too tight and then they don't give with the rest of the fabric. Now I will show you how I work through minding my tension and creating nice even floats on the inside of the work and get that stretch that you're looking for. So now you've chosen your contrasting and your main color. Now we need to practice holding two yarns in, two or more, in the same hand. So when you're working with two or more strands, you can do it a couple of different ways. Now, you can hold one in your left hand and one in your right hand. And depending on if you are a continental knitter or a thrower, would depend on what works best for you. You would take and work this one when needed and then this one when needed if you're a thrower. If you're a continental knitter, sometimes it might be easier to hold both strands in the same hand and work just that one color when you need that one color. So practicing working with two strands or more of yarn is very helpful to get a feel of how your color work will work up and how to change those colors. And you could start with just two colors and work every other stitch, every other color. And that way you don't have to worry about floats to begin with while you're working on practicing working with two strands of colors. Now, if you're doing more, you're going to need to have a little bit of float work. And let's talk about floats. So for my pattern here that I have worked up, the first 5 stitches are in the main color. So I'm going to work those in the main color to start with. That's 4 and 5. Now I'm going to add in my contrasting color. And mind you, I am a continental knitter, so it will look a little different if you're a thrower, English knitter. So I've knitted my first stitch with my color, my contrasting color here. And I need to knit 5 more stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and knit the next 4 stitches for a total of 5 stitches in the contrasting color. Now we need to switch back because it's 5 and 5 for my pattern. Now we need to switch back to our main color. And as I was talking about earlier, you need to mind your tension, and now we need to understand how to do that. So if I take this strand, let's look at the back of this work. If I take this strand and I was to knit it without giving slack for a nice size float and good tension, it's going to cause all those stitches to pucker up. So the way to avoid that is to take and stretch out those stitches. So from your last stitch of your main color, you're going to hold that back and you're going to stretch out those next 5 stitches of color. And that is going to give you a nice size float. Now we're going to knit that very first stitch of the main color and go ahead and knit the next 4 for a total of 5 in the main color. So now when we turn our work over, we have this strand, and that's where you get that stranded knitting. That is a float, and we are floating over the top of those 5 stitches. Now we're going to do it again, but we're going to do it with our contrasting color for the next 5. So I'm going to stretch out these 5 stitches here of main color, knit the next 5 in the contrasting color, keeping good tension. And now we'll turn that work over and check out our float for this contrasting color. So here we are. It looks loose, but it isn't. It gives you that stretch that you're going to need for that fabric to stretch out to go over someone's head. Or if you're putting socks on and you're doing this stranded knitting in socks. So next we go and stretch out those 5, and we're going to jump over and start the next 5, which is main color. Now, creating patterns are very similar to crochet, graph gans, things like that. If you want to do some graph work, it's very easy to create a pattern, and I will show you how to do that next. So here is the pattern that I am working from. I went on Stitch Fiddle, which you can just grab some graph paper and work this up by coloring in the boxes. Each square represents a stitch. So what I have is a 5 main color and a 5 contrasting color on a diagonal. So every round it shifts 1 stitch over the color itself. Now, you might ask yourself, well, how do I know it's going to work up to where it meets in the round? Well, you can take that graph paper and take and meet it up in the round. So that way it is consistent all the way through, and give it a little tape, and that way you can kind of, you know, get a feel for what your pattern's going to look like in the round. Now, for mine, for this particular one, which is a large child, small youth hat, this particular one is done in, it's a lighter weight yarn. I did this with a 4.5 millimeter. It is 80 stitches. Now, if you want to jump up to a worsted weight and do 80 stitches, you're going to have closer to an adult. So here's 80 stitches in worsted weight. Now, that isn't even stretched out. That's just as it is here. And it is in a worsted weight. And this is a 2x2 ribbing, the same as this. So knit 2, purl 2. You can do that and work the same pattern, same exact pattern. But this one here is in a lighter DK, and it is also 80 stitches with a 4.5 millimeter knitting needles. Now, this is just hat size circular needles. You can use DPNs, what have you. For some just basic dimensions on this hat, this part here, the brim, is right at 2 inches. The Colorwork section, the body of it, is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 inches in height. And then I started my decrease. And I did my decrease every 10 stitches for the first round. Now, I do just a basic decrease that I have in multiple other videos. If you would like me to do a video on this particular beanie, please let me know down in the comments section, and I would be more than happy to. So, that is a basic get started on the colorwork or stranded knitting. Now, if you get more than 5 stitches before you change your color, you will have to tack along the way. And that is more like, let's go into it and I will show you. So let me grab this main color and contrasting color here. If I was to need to make, say, 7 stitches in the main color before I switched back to my contrasting color, I would work 5 stitches, and then I would want to tack this down. I would want to make sure that I don't have too big of floats. So I'm going to have my 5 stitches stretched out. So I'm going to take my main color and I'm going to go below my contrasting color and bring it up and around. Now with my stitches still stretched out, I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches because I needed a total of 7. And what that does is that tacks that float down so it's not more than 5 stitches for the float. Now I can work the next few stitches in the contrasting color, and I don't have this great big huge float behind my work. There we go. And then we would jump back to the main color if that's the pattern. Stretch it out and work the main color. This is what I mean by the way that I carry my yarn when I'm working 2 strands, 2 different colors. So there we are. All right. Hopefully now you can jump into either your first or a new knitted project that is stranded color work and feel more confident in working with 2 or more strands of yarn, as well as working with different colors and creating those floats, minding your tension. I hope that this video has helped you along the way. Now, if you're an avid color work knitter, I encourage you to drop down into the comments section and give us some of your tips and tricks along the way as to how you work color work. What makes it easier for you? All right, everyone, be blessed, be a blessing, and until next time, bye for now.